Thank you for coming to this session. I would like to introduce Mariano Fernandez Enguita. When I agreed to introduce Professor Mariano Fernandez Enguita at this international conference on education, I expected this to be a relatively easy task. For one thing, Mariano Fernandez is one of the most famous Spanish sociologists in both Spain and internationally. Also, I had been familiar with his name since I was a child, because the bookshelves in my home held several of his books. With his more than 300 articles and book chapters, and his 20 books are evidence of his productivity and popularity as an author. Google Scholar shows that there are more than 10,000 citations of his works. You probably know that his research has focused mainly on social equality and inequality, education and training policies, the impact of social change and technological innovation, and the sociology of organizations, especially schools. He was visiting researcher at the universities such as Stanford, Berkeley, Wisconsin-Madison, or the London School of Economics, the London Institute of Education, the National Institute for Educational Research in Lyon, and also in Tokyo, in Sofia. You also probably know that during his time as professor of sociology in the University of Salamanca, he directed the Department of Sociology and Communication, the Center for Social Analysis, and the Japanese Hispanic Cultural Center, although this I learned myself. You may certainly be aware also that currently he's professor of sociology at the Complutense University in Madrid, where he has coordinated the doctorate in education and created the innovation project Hiperaula. And you may also know that in February, he was appointed director of the Spanish National Institute for Public Administration, where there is no doubt he will promote exciting initiatives to improve the Spanish public administration. Finding out all those details was the easy part. Google is all that you need. However, since I believe I've got to know Mariano during the last 5 years or so, I wanted also to make this introduction a little bit more personal. I have been honored to share the floor with this prestigious scholar on a couple of occasions, and I've been lucky enough to hear him speak, as you will in a few minutes' time. He's a powerful and convincing speaker, and from experience, I can tell you he's a prophet in his own land. He also tells what he thinks, regardless of what the audience might want to hear. However, he's always able to back up what he says with evidence, as good scholars do. But Mariano is much more than a renowned academic, and here I'm referring more to his readily and disinterestedly helps colleagues, including apprentice sociologists like myself. I say all this from my personal experience, but I'm confident that many would endorse my view. For me, he's not only a leading academic, he's a supportive colleague, and more especially, a friend to enjoy an after-dinner chat with. It is to be hoped that this pandemic will soon be over, and there would be more opportunities to enjoy a glass of wine together after a conference dinner, perhaps. Com sorte em Lisboa, escutando un belo fado. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Professor Mariano Fernandez Enguita. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Now I introduce you to Daniel. Daniel is a very good sociologist who's making a very important work, especially on time, on education, I think, at this moment and this period, no, that you should follow. We have no beer or no wine. We are not at the Taberna dos Frates, which I like in Lisbon, but we have water, which is not the same, but it's very important to talk. Okay, I will try to use a presentation, which will help with my English. Let me see, oh, well, I lost it. I have to find here, where is it, to present. Where is it? Reaction, chat, participants, probably. Leave.
Professor, you have a share
Where
screen,
is the,
share screen
the
option.
button to present? Yeah, where is it?
Near chat. Participants chat and share screen.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Ah, okay, I see, it's in green, okay. Okay. Yeah. I was commenting before that we use so many platforms for video. I usually use Meet, that when comes the time, you never find nothing. Okay, I want to sure. This one. Are you see it?
Sí, perfecto.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Finally. Well, I use this title, The School in Society Against All Odds, because it's somewhat ironic that some 30 or almost 40 years after the Illich work, The School in Society, we are now witnessing a real deschooling, not deschooling, but maybe classrooming, which is a very strange word. In Spanish, it would be something that like desalarization. And in fact, we have not much evidence. I mean, I think we really don't have a real, precise and secure data on what is happening in the school. We have many information. We have many speed works on many speedy trials to expose what is happening, but it's very difficult to have a real say, sure information about it, but we have some. No? We have some. Okay, I'm trying. No, it doesn't move. Oh, now, okay. Sorry. It didn't work. Now it works. Maybe you remember that sentence of Groucho Marx, we say, why do they call love when they mean sex? My first question could be now, why do we call it education when we are really normally speaking about the school or simply the classroom? No? There is a common joke in Spanish and probably in Portuguese about fratres, about friars. And in English, it's usually told about Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle is the teacher in a tale by Washington Irving called Sleepy Hollow, and he gets asleep before the American independence. He wakes up later when America is a free country, not free, but let's say an independent country. I wouldn't say free yet for what happened then. And then he understands nothing of what happens in the now free colony. And he understands nothing. He wakes up some 90 years later, more or less. He doesn't recognize anything until the very moment he's being the object of jokes and whatever, until the very moment in which he goes into a classroom. And when he goes into a classroom, he says, well, this is a classroom, this is a school, I know where I am. No? And now the joke of says that we could say that today. We could take Rip Van Winkle, put him before a kiosk of, let's say, a TV or a factory or a road or whatever, he would be absolutely alienated. But if we took him to a classroom, he would say, this is a school, because I'm seeing here more or less what I saw before I got asleep. But time goes on, and I will say that the coronavirus has changed everything. I would say that sometime we shall speak about three. There is an H missing there. Three greatest educational innovators. The first one could be Socrates. I'm not sure that Socrates was an innovator at all, but I'm sure that we still speak about him and his teaching, and especially the dialogical teaching and so on and so forth. No? A real innovator was Comenius. Probably he didn't invent many things. He simply made a synthesis because the things he proposed were already being done by the Frères de la Vie en Commune, or by the Jesuits, especially by several religious orders. By Comenius systematized all that. And let's say that Comenius systematized and exposed what then was to become the modern pedagogy or modern education. We should say classical now, classical school, classical education, especially the classical classroom. And then came the coronavirus, which made everything explode into air. No? Not sure that my slides are ordered. Well, when pandemics came, there could be a response in 3 different levels. Let's say in a macro level, let's say by political authorities, whether state, regional, or metropolitan. No? It could be in a meso level, and I mean by this schools, small local authorities, school networks, and so on. Or it could be by teachers and by teacher teams in their own classrooms. No? What I want to do now is to compare, let's say, 2 kinds of response for which we can find examples in China and in Spain. Let me make a check for a second, because I'm not sure the slide I will order it, so I will have to retire this, see the whole, and be back in a minute. Well, can be, okay. It's not perfect, but it's enough. Maybe you know this kind of photograph. This is China. This is an exam in China in time of coronavirus. This is China too. This is the way in which we imagine China. And this is China too. This is more important because this is what is called the examination hall. The examination hall is more than 1,000 years old. The official name is examination hall. Maybe you can distinguish here. There is these small cells in which each cell was occupied by an applicant, let's say, to the bright future of a Mandarin. They had to make a lot of exams. It was very long, it was very selective, but it was very promising for those who got the position. It was called examination hall. They could examine simultaneously thousands of people. More colloquially, it was called the examination hell. But it gives an idea of how hundreds of thousands of people can be managed at the time. No? Some way, this is what's happened now. There is what has happened in China is very well summarized and synthesized in a paper by Long Yun-Su and other authors, which is titled "Schools Out, but Class is On." We have lost the school because of the coronavirus, but we are going to continue with the class. So the subtitle will be, it is the largest online education in the world today, taking China's practical exploration during the COVID-19 epidemic prevention and control as an example. And in fact, it was an example. You can see in the Scholar that this is very recent, but this is a very much cited quoted article. 75 quotations are very many quotations in such a short time. And the idea that they present, I will not develop on it because it's very easy to understand. They say, when we take every children from school to home, they say the Chinese authorities didn't expect every teacher or every school to move as such. and be able to school and to keep in charge of every student. And they say the motto should be one teacher, one excellent course, one lesson, one excellent teacher. What does it mean? It really means scaling. It really means scaling in the way in which only a central, somewhat authoritarian authority, let's say, of power could do it. It's not every teacher is expected to give good courses in this situation. What they ask to every teacher is to try and deliver one lesson, one only good lesson. And then the educational authorities will select and choose the best of the lesson, and they broadcast them for every student. So one teacher who should provide an excellent course and one lesson for all the students, or for as many students as possible, should be delivered only by one excellent teacher. So this is scaling. And this is made, well, you have some data down on how the process works, but the idea is that we select a good lesson, we broadcast it through TV or through radio or whatever, and then the rest of teachers, they deliver some kind of support. This is very Chinese, but this is not unique to China or let's say to the Eastern world. It happened also in the Western world. I remember that almost about 212 or 13, there was a letter from the Department of Political Science in San Jose University to Michael Sandel, asking him, please, to not deliver massive conferences which could substitute for teachers and teacher jobs. San Jose University sounds like Spanish, but this is the state university closer to Silicon Valley. I mean, it's closer than Stanford, much closer than Berkeley, etc. It's the closest university to the Silicon Valley. So we're speaking about people who are very close, very familiar with technology. And then what happened with Michael Sandel? Michael Sandel is a political philosopher, very well known. He is famous for his massive and engaging lessons on ethics, political philosophy, etc. You can see him up there in Harvard University, sorry. They're down probably, I'm not sure, I think it's Korea. Here is the same thing. We have Michael Sandel delivering through a video wall for students around the world. Here down is again in Korea, from maybe 1,000 of students. He's a kind of rock star university professor, no? And but this is episodic in the Western world. What we expect in the Western school is that schools, local authorities, teachers, individually or in small teams, they are able to organize education. We don't want them, we don't ask them usually to scale in the way that Michael Sandel did, much less in the way that the Chinese authorities organize the school during the confinement and during the schooling in time on pandemics. In fact, as I said, we have no very systematic information or data about what is really happening. I don't think it's a problem here in Spain, it's a general problem. Maybe one of the more systematic reports that I know is a report from Fernando Reimers and Andreas Schleicher. This means from the Global Education Initiative in Harvard Graduate School of Education, and for the side of the Schleicher, it means, as you know, the OECD, PISA, etc. They made this report, a framework to guide an education response to the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. And what they did was to interview some 300 people in 100 countries, in 100 countries. So it's not very systematic. I mean, we cannot say that it's a statistical survey or whatever, but let's say it gives a glimpse of what's happening. And the first conclusion that they show is that the impression that what the informant said, very different informants from this 100, exactly 98 countries, they say this. When asked what has the government or network of schools done to date to support the ongoing academic instruction of students, a large percentage indicate nothing. Follow it by providing encouragement to school to use online resources and so on. I mean, the idea is that authorities were not able, generally speaking, able to provide general useful formulas, at least in the area of the OECD countries surveyed by the report. When there is an attempt made in Spain by Educación Conectada, which is Connected Education, it's a research group in Granada or Malaga. The FAD is it's a foundation, a fund against drugs, but drug addiction, but funds some research on education, youth, and so on. And BBVI is a powerful bank, foundation and a bank, and they did also this kind of study, which consists in asking through Twitter, through the web, through the net in general. So it's a kind of a snowball survey. It's not statistically representative, but let's say that it's typologically representative. And the conclusion was that teachers are more or less happy with how they responded, and they think they did what they could, but they feel the need for a new culture of cooperation and coordination within schools. Teacher individualism has a negative impact on the students, generating confusion, problems, etc. And but centers in which there is better leadership from the management team, good coordination strategies, and cooperation between faculty, they have been able to solve the situation more effectively. I insist, it's a qualitative impression. We cannot say that an 80% of this or a 20% of that, this or that, but this is the panorama. There is some other reports, for example, from the Investigación COVID de Atlántida, which is a group which made an effort with Fundación Cotec to present an overview of what was happening. And the idea is more or less alike. No? When they asked teachers which were the problems, say lack of digital skills from the student, a lack of digital media, a lack of familiar support. The less important problem, according to Spanish teachers, is the lack of teaching coordination. Any other problem is more important. When we ask families, it's quite different. Almost half the families, they say the teaching coordination was a real problem. And in fact, I think that was the problem. When we ask students, when we hear the complaints of the students, and there is some data by this research of Atlántida, another report from Cotec, from the already quoted report of FAD. There was some work in the RASE, the Revista de la Asociación de Sociología de la Educación. There was some interviews in the press, particularly in El País, which has created a section on education for this time. What the students say usually is that there is a lack of digital skills and infrastructure, that there is too much repetitive homework. They receive homework and homework in form of tests, exercises, problems, too many talking heads. I mean, the teachers make the effort to record their lessons, and then they deliver to students, but they are talking heads. There is no interaction usually there. In families particularly complain that some teachers reject or lack the skill to use the video. It's not well expressed in the sentence here. Some teachers reject, schools had to to leave the denials of many teachers to be recorded, or the inability to be recorded normally. So they couldn't deliver what was the first plan, which was to broadcast, to deliver recorded lessons to students. The skills, the digital skills of teachers are very, very unequal. Students complain and families complain that they see no clear purpose for activities. They receive activities, let's say homework, etc., but they don't see what for. And they don't find middle-term plans. Let's say since the beginning, practically since April and especially May, it wasn't clear. It wasn't clear whether schools were going to remain open. They were supposed to reopen at the end of the course of the academic year in June. That was the orientation and the proposal of state and regional authorities. In fact, that never happened. That happened only in a minority of schools. It depended very much on the ability of school heads and so on. And the fact is that the theory then was that it wasn't important to open before the summer, but to prepare the return after summer. But when summer ended and the course commenced, there was no plan. I mean, the only plan was to open with the sanitary recommendations and so on, but there was not much difference on what happened. What this has revealed, I think, is a question of governance. I mean, it's a question of how authority and decision-making is to be distributed between the different levels of the educational institutions and schools. Let's say that we are in the middle of this is ordinarily called a VUCA context. I mean, a context which is volatile, which is quickly changing, which surprises us in many ways. It's uncertain. I mean, it's unpredictable. We don't have systematic information. It's very difficult to assess what is really happening. It's complex because there is many different functions, not always compatible, for example, education and care in the schools, or there's very different interests, families and teachers, and so it's complex. It's not complicated, it's complex. It's not precise. It's not easy to see the effects of any measure, and it's ambiguous. I mean, it's hazy, it's difficult to understand, it's confusing. Especially there is a multiplicity of actors and decision makers. In Spain, this is not China, this is the difference. In Spain, we have the national and regional authorities in education. The national authority is able to legislate in some aspect, but not every, and it cannot manage the educational system. Then the regional authorities have not decentralized to the level of schools. And generally speaking, at least in public schools, which are 2/3 of education, of general education. In Spain, there is no decentralization, there is no devolution of competencies to the level of schools. There is some intervention of local authorities, but not much. Usually they provide services, additional collateral services, but services that have been important in this situation of pandemics, because especially they are focused to vulnerable population, and they are able to arrive to homes when schools are not, etc., etc. Then we have principals and teachers, but principals, they don't have many competencies in Spanish schools. Probably you know that Portugal and Spain, they were called the Iberian exception, because there were two countries in which teachers elected heads, directors, principals. It's no longer the case in Portugal. It's changed quite somewhat in Spain, but it's yet more or less the Spanish exception. And then we have the health and social services, families, students, and so on. So it's a very dispersed context. And it's meant as stress test as never before. I mean, I think we have no idea on how difficult it could be to combine such a complex, such a variegated level of decision makers. No, in fact, we could say that it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Even today, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the way in which we would like it to do it. No, I think what would be desirable would be the opposite of what the article Batsu says for China. Well, they say that in China, school is out, but class is on. I think what would be desirable here is that we are able to say class is out, but school is on. I mean, the classroom has flight, is no longer here because the pandemics and the schooling has ended with it. But school should be able to assure the education and the learning of the student, and even the care of those most vulnerable groups. No? What has happened is that it has depended on the degree of devolution and autonomy. I think that in the context of OECD countries, probably countries like Estonia, Finland, Japan, Netherlands, which are very decentralized to the level of the school, have been able to deliver a better response. No? In the Spanish case, it should be added that there is two different networks of a school. We have 2/3 of primary and secondary students in public schools, and 1/3 more or less in private and charter schools. And even if we have all the motifs and all the reasons to sustain public schools, because they are more inclusive, they are majoritary, and so on and so forth, the fact is that in this crisis, they have played in disadvantage. And disadvantage has come from two factors, or three. The first one is that principals have more competences. They are directors, they are more able to managers, they are more able to manage in private and charter schools than in public schools. So it has been easier for them to centralize the response at the level of school, even at the level of groups of schools. No? It hasn't been the case in public schools because the autonomy of the teacher is the real autonomy in the school. The school has a little autonomy in front of the political authorities, but the teacher has a lot of autonomy and independence before the principal or the headmaster. No? Second thing is that usually private and charter schools, they have projects. They have pedagogical projects, even bad pedagogical projects, but projects anyway. And they have projects that every teacher knows, families know, and they know that they must surrender or they must subordinate to those projects. And in some cases, they are good projects. And in some cases, they include the digitization or digitalization of learning and teaching. And so it has been easier to make the transition from schooling to the school. No? And it is also sometimes a different kind of digitalization. I mean, the public schools, they have better, they have more, usually more equipment. They have even more connectivity. They have more, let's say, training for teachers, but this is less oriented to learning. In private and chartered schools, digitalization is a market asset. They use it to attract clients, to attract families and students, and so they try to project it at least at the level of information and communication with families, and probably making use of platforms, etc. Because especially the main educational networks in the private field, they are also proprietors. They also have publishers and consulting for digitalization and so on. No? In public schools, usually digitalization is more for the back office. It's more for the preparation of classes, it's more for the work of the teacher with himself or herself, and not with students. No? It's less oriented to a transition to the digital environment. But anyway, there is a casuistry of individual schools, depending especially on what their pedagogical teams and their heads are able to do and want to do. And so there has not been a homogeneous response, as could be the case in China, but just the opposite. There's an enormous dispersion. There's fantastic schools, private or public, which have been able to move easily to the digital environment, and they have been able to keep, let's say, students schooled outside of classrooms. And there's been also others which really, even today, they don't know what to do except to form smaller groups, to diminish the ratios and try to make a group which are not bigger than 20 or which can keep distances. And so the way to do it is to send the students and pupils every 2 weeks to home or to school in order to make use of the space. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mariano, for this very enlightening presentation. I believe there is going to be a lot of questions. Please, I've been told that we better use the chat, and then we will proceed to pass the questions to Mariano. I guess he's having the right chat. So, Maria, this is a concerning research. Okay. She said some families' complaints are curious, for instance, you can read it.
Online.
Estás a ver? Porque, olha lá, tira lá ali uma fotografia.
Vamos, we go. Well, I wouldn't be so radical. I wouldn't say that school is not contributing to education, but I would say simply that school contributes to a kind of education. And this kind of education is to deliver information and knowledge through a materiality of schooling, which now has exploded and disappeared. I think that materiality of schooling was inadequate today. I mean, it had its time. It was the kind of low-cost formula that Comenio created in order to be able to educate thousands and thousands of children everywhere. He said, we will teach everything totally to everybody. That was the motto of Comenium, but I think it's no longer adequate today. I think we need to be able to move in the direction of more innovative learning environment. I mean, we need to be able to flexibilize, to make more flexible space, time, groupings, activities, sequences, so on and so forth. This is what somewhere I have called the idea of the hyperaula, I mean, a hyperspace, no? Which is flexible, open, etc., and includes the reorganization of time. Many people, when we created a hyperaula is a hyper classroom, it's a contradiction. I mean, it has no sense in English. It would be a hyper hall or hyper room or hyper something, but never a hyper classroom, because a classroom is a room in which you put a class. I mean, just the contrary, no? And they ask, how can I do an hyperaula if I can tear down the walls, I have no money and so on. And when the pandemics came, I said, well, now you have it. Now you have it, and now you have no more walls, you have no more grid schedule for time or for classes, you can do what you want. And now even if you are not able to use the digital platform, or do you don't know how to make a video, don't worry. You can gather with 2, 3 more teachers, you can unite, you can accumulate your groups, because there's no problem internet for that, no? And then you can distribute the work. I mean, you can make co-teaching. And I think that some way, the pandemics opened this possibility, and some schools and some teachers, many of them, but a minority, they are experimenting with all these possibilities. I mean, they feel free from the old groups, the old walls, the old subjects, the old time schedule, and they are doing it all right. But I think also that at this very moment, we are living, let's say, a war, a confrontation between the old and the new. I mean, there is some people who are taking the chance, if we can call that a chance, no? Of the disorganization introduced by the coronavirus, and they are trying to innovate with very good initiatives. But there is many people who are saying, "No, stop. Let's go to the old model. All we need to do is we need, some 100,000 more teachers to make smaller groups, or maybe we can make shorter schedules in order that keep students separate or whatever, but we want to have one teacher, one group of students, one room."
Okay, I think we have a question by Nadri Asi. If you would like to write it down or to ask for it.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much. I have a question, really to complicate a little bit, starting with the title of your presentation. When you say class is out, but school is on, I want to ask you if we add something else. Class is out, but school is on and in.
Good.
Meaning here that we're changing space. And what are the implications? If school is in, but not in the schoolyard, what is the significance of moving in? And what are, in terms of social class even, think of a middle class family with a big house in a city. Think of people who live in an apartment, but think of people who are in the countryside, who may be in other contexts disadvantaged, but in this particular context, maybe they don't have the internet, but what are the possibilities for them to learn? And I'm thinking you probably know of this book by Philip Jackson on what is learned. on apple picking. You know, what can be learned outside of the formal school setting. So can you explore some of those for us?
Just for maths, but let me try to say something briefly. I think when we take I think we conflate usually education, school, and classroom, no?
Yeah.
But the school, the root of the word school was scolae, was a free activity.
Yeah.
Was a free activity in which, let's say, it's true, a free activity for men, free men. They should be citizens in Greece and so on. It wasn't for everybody, but it was a free activity in which one developed oneself by learning music, poetry, sports, and so on. No? And for a long time, it was confused. It was the possibility of very few people, and the formula of convenience was the classroom. But the classroom is what it says in English. I mean, it sounds very fine in Spanish, aula. You don't know what means really in Portuguese, because sala de aula, no? Is the room for the lesson, okay, no? But I think the right word is classroom, or salle de classe in French, because it's the room in which you put a class of people. Usually class, formerly class meant also gender, and it meant social class, and it meant race, because education was only for a part of the population. But even today, when it doesn't mean or not so much those divides, it means a class of people in the sense that we take children at an age and we want them to move at the same pace, making the same things in the same time and with the same results. And if they don't get the same results, we say, well, it's your fault. You don't go for a study and so on. No? So I think that the coronavirus, it has come to free us, to liberate us suddenly from what was really a problem, and it offer a possibility. As one usually says from crisis can be seen also as opportunities and of course risks and dangers. No? And we had, of course, the digital divide. No? The digital divide means it depends on which country are you thinking. In some countries, digital divide is no longer or is not mainly a material divide. No? The idea of digital divide was born thinking that some people had computers and others didn't, or some people had connection and others didn't, and it was thought as a divide, the haves and the have-nots. I think it should be better understood as inequality. It's not a divide, yes or no, but there's many differences, no? I think that the real digital divide in that sense, what is called the first digital divide, or the divide on access, is now it was almost marginal in northern Western countries. If you take, for example, Spain is not a especially rich country, no? It's in the middle, more or less, but there is something about 10% of the population who didn't have usual access to informatics and the internet, and the percentage is much lower in families with children in school age. But the pandemics was a real test of stress, because it meant that in a home in which there is maybe a computer and a connection, this computer is going to be used for teleworking, for telecommuting, no? Working at distance, is going to be used as the only way for ocio, for entertainment and whatever, for the whole family. It's going to be used not for homework, but for all the school work by the children, which can be various, etc. So it's too much. So the first digital divide has reappeared now for the Spanish families, and I think that wherever. No, I don't know For how many people, we don't really know. I mean, we know for some cities or some spaces, but I think anyway that in most cases it's a divide that can be overcome by authorities. I mean, it's not impossible in any way to give devices, even connection to all these students. No? Now, then there is a second divide, which is more important, which is the divide in use. How do you use the internet? What do you do when you are connected? Are you learning? Are you making something interesting? I don't mean learning. I mean, no, I don't mean studying, but are you making something that gives you information, knowledge, makes you better, makes you know the world, makes you get connections or whatever? Or are you looking videos and videos and videos of YouTube that make you laugh and no more than that? Are you looking and seeing only lolcats? Or are you all the time on Facebook? And this difference depends a lot on the capital, let's say the digital, the school, and the cultural capital of the family. And the more potent, the more powerful a medium is, like the internet, the bigger the differences can become. No? So what I think that the problem of the school now, in this period in which we are not able to warrant the normal schooling, let's say, I think that the schools would have to do, that's what I say, that's the reason because of which I say that school must be on, and on means functioning, should be on, in, around you, available and all that. But I mean, there is probably many students and pupils now of middle class. Where I live now, for example, I can see a garden, I can see the children of the neighbors. They have no problem. I mean, they have devices, they have connection, they have educated parents, they have time, they have gardens, they have people at the service. So they really don't need a school. I mean, it's not urgent for them to go to school. They want to go because their friends are there, but they cannot embrace their friend. So it's not an urgent need. But there is other children in very different situations whose families have not the same cultural level, whose equipment is not the same at home, even whose conditions of living can be unhealthy or even dangerous in this situation of confinement. And I think that for those people, school should be open, I would say 24/7, 365. So we can diversify. The question is that we should be able to diversify. We don't have to say we don't have to say everybody must come to school every day, or everybody must stay at home, or everybody must be 1 week yes and 1 week no, or everybody 2 hours. We should be able to diversify and say those who need it more, they have a school. A school is here for them. School is here to accompany them at home. School is here to receive them at any moment. School is here to put them aside the teacher. And those people who have better family support, well, they can have other combination. If those who don't need a school don't come every day, those who need it can come more frequently, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you.
Answer you.
Okay, there is any other question? No hand raised. Okay, I think if you would like, please go ahead.
Hi, Manuela.
May I ask a question? Raise an issue?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay, I'm Manuela Guilherme from Portugal. The discussion that you started about in or out of school is very interesting. You know, I have some doubts that about digitalization and about the technology, meaning automatically change. You can, I think it's a medium. It's a wonderful medium because it gives you a wider access to things, but you can have a traditional classes with these media as in the same way or almost the same way. And it's not because you are at home with a computer that means change. And I mean for children. With the COVID, one of the pictures that struck me was about Denmark. When Denmark, and you know, I'm not one of those fascinated with the Scandinavian countries, but about Denmark, I have some experience, and I'm not fascinated and think that they do what they do is good always. But the picture showed the children starting classes and together with the teacher in a garden, for example. For them, this is traditional, to have the children outside and the babies outside all the time, even in bad weather. So I believe that it's important to get the children out of school, and the COVID should be a good argument, a good reason to go out of the classroom. The students, the children, and the teacher. And I believe that doesn't happen, and it should happen so. So my question is, change doesn't come automatically with technology, but with the interaction between teachers and students inside class or outside the class. That's the issue I would like to raise.
I fully agree with you, Manuela. What I would say, however, I wouldn't say technology. I mean, everything is technology. I would say if you are at home and you have a cleaning robot, you say, oh, look, what a technology, no? And did you see this? It's cleaning the floor and so on, and going through the room, it avoids obstacles, and so that's technology, no? But you don't ever say my frigo is technology, because you were born with it, or almost. Not exactly. When I was a child, there was ice sellers in the street, no? I mean, a book, a blackboard, a notebook, a pencil, that's all technology. We were not born with that. Simply that's the technology of the time of the press, or even before. I mean, there is three great revolutions in communication. I think they were before, after speech. No? They were writing was the first one, the press was the second one, and the internet and digitalization is the third one. So what does technology mean? Technology means new possibilities and new affordances. One of these affordances is to use it to reinforce what you have, even to make it worse. We all know, for example, that digital blackboards have been used, yes, because they are blackboards. We know that the learning management systems, LMS, like Moodle or whatever, they can be used to control whatever every student does every minute or every second. How many times has the student made click here? So technology can be used in very conservative ways. Probably China is one of those places. And probably the motto and the model of school is out, but class the class is out, but school is in. What they really have done is to take the class, and not the classroom, but yes, the class, to the home of the children. So you can use the technology in very conservative ways. But I would say that you can use it otherwise. And I would say that this technology, as distinct from the book, is interactive. There is a famous dialogue by Socrates, which was written by Plato, of course, in which Socrates is told the story of the invention of writing. It's, well, not Socrates, he's the pharaoh of Egypt. He's told by the gold thorn, I don't remember the name exactly now, he's told about the invention of writing. And Socrates says, why are you happy about that? Do you think that you will learn because you can read something and you have it in a book? And he says, no, because you will have remindings. You will have something as if we say the checklist. You will have a reminding, but you will lose memory. And Socrates, by memory, meant a real understanding and assumption of something. No? And this is cited as an example, and I think it's all right, it's correct to do it, of an educator, Socrates, who lived and worked in a technology, the word, the dialogue, and he was unhappy about the coming technology, which was writing. You know? Fortunately, Plato was not wholly Socratic, and he wrote about it, and thanks to that, we know about it. But there's a second part in what Socrates says, and he says, if you read a book, and there is something you don't understand, you don't agree, then ask the book. Ask the book and wait for the response. There will be no response. The technology of the print, which is the technology that Comenius imported to education, is not at all interactive. But digital technology is becoming more and more and more interactive. This is a show, but it's not only this possibility, it's connecting people. Technology, properly speaking, is not interacting in Zoom, no? But when you take an app or you take a text corrector or whatever, you are using an interactive technology. So technology today is interactive as it's connecting. So there is many much better possibilities with it than with the book. Everything you could do with a book or with a notebook, you can do now with a tablet or a computer. Everything, absolutely everything, and much cheaper and much better, probably. It doesn't smell like the old books, the smell that I love, but that's the only thing. Huh? But there is many things that you can do with technology which can be done. And what happens now is that we should be able to use this technology in that way. This is independent. This is a different question from the fact that schools are not only educational or learning or teaching institutions. We teachers like to say that because that dignifies our position. But the schools are also, and first of all, institutions for care. If they were not needed for care, I mean, to take care of children, of minors, generally speaking, many families wouldn't need it, wouldn't need them. Many students could leave at school at any time. In fact, we are trying to retain them even by force. No? So I fully agree that there is a possibility and there is the need to use other spaces. But this is a question of the culture of the profession. I think it's from Denmark also the saying that there is no cold weather but inadequate dressing. So I think it's fully okay to take children out to the street, to the field, to the garden, or whatever, or to take them to the library, to the museum, or whatever. But what we cannot do, sure, is to multiply by 2 the number of teachers. So if the middle, if the mean, let's say, of students or pupil by teacher is 20 in a classroom, or is 10 in primary school, or not in the classroom, but by teacher, which is different because teachers are not all the time in the classroom. No? I mean, students spend much more time in classroom than teachers. So the ratios are different when you measure them in relation to teachers or in relation to classroom. I mean, we cannot change that. I mean, not importantly now. Now less than ever, because we are in the middle of a very, very hard economic crisis. And of course, we will need more teachers, but we need also more nurses, more physicians, more policemen, more everything. No? But I think it's important that teachers are able to use in another way the space. So the real possibility is not that one teacher can gather with 6 students in a garden. The real possibility is that, let's say, 2 or 3 teachers can get out with 40, 50 or 60 students to the woods and be able to use in another way the space and be used to use the space in a healthy way now and be able to provide care, to keep providing care even in this difficult situation. But of course, you don't always need technology. And there is an old law, I don't remember now, I forget everything today, but it's a law of technology which says technology is not good, neither good nor bad nor neutral. You see, you can think, so what? What technology, what you make of it is the way in which you use it. And in which you design it, of course. You cannot make anything with anything.
Thank you very much. Time will tell how much we are being able to use this pandemic, no, to change or just to collapse and to come back to where we were. Thank you very much, Professor Enguita, Fernandez Enguita, and thank you very much the audience and people who participated in the questions. And I ask you to come back tomorrow to the session on Friday. And thank you very much and have a good evening, all of you. Thank you very much.
Very nice to be with you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Gracias, Mariano.
Obrigadinho. Obrigado.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Obrigado, Antonio, Manuela, Daniel, todos.
Muchas gracias.
Muito obrigado.